Hey guys, I feel like it's been so long since I've just sat down in my house and filmed a video. It's been crazy because I've been out of town for school, and then I've been off this past week as well, so it's just been kind of getting back into the swing of things and all of that. Um, but I wanted to make sure that I filmed a video about pharmacy school labs because I've been getting a lot of questions about labs since I just went down to school to do my labs on campus. And I've been getting a lot of questions from people just kind of what to expect from labs, some tips for how to succeed in pharmacy school labs. So that's what this video is going to be about. So I'm going to give you 5 tips for how you can succeed in pharmacy school labs. Okay, the very first tip is know your basics. So what I mean by that is when you learned like your lab equipment and things like that back in high school, you really need to know that stuff. Because in your lab manual, which your school should give you ahead of time, like with all the labs in there, all the procedures and everything, it's going to say, use this piece of lab equipment, use this piece of lab equipment. And if you don't remember what that is, like if you don't know what a graduated cylinder is, that's a basic thing that you need to know. Otherwise, you're going to be so confused. So make sure you know your basics. Make sure you know how to properly measure different things. So if you're measuring out milliliters of a liquid, you should be using a graduated cylinder, not a beaker, right? If you're measuring grams, you're using your balance. Make sure you know how to like tare the balance, all that stuff, basic stuff. But some people just kind of skate through that stuff in high school and college and don't really pay attention. And at pharmacy school, they just kind of throw you in the lab and they're just kind of like, okay, follow the procedure, which they expect that you know how to do. So make sure you know those very basic lab equipment things, very basic measurement techniques, all of that stuff, so that you know what you're doing and you can follow the procedure properly. Okay, tip number 2 is prepare ahead of time. So you should be getting the lab manual from your school, your professor or whoever teaches it ahead of the lab, right? You shouldn't be getting it the day of. So you should have time to sit down with that lab manual and read through it, read through the procedure so you know what you're doing. So when I was down at school, the night before the lab, I would always take it out and just read through it, read through the background information, the procedure of the lab, so that way when you're getting into the lab, you're not like, okay, so what are we doing today? You have an idea. You're not going to be kind of stumbling around lost because you don't know what you're doing. And that way also, if you're struggling with that topic in the lecture component, you know that you need to like research it, look it up, familiarize yourself with that concept so that you're not confused the entire lab. That makes sense. So definitely read through ahead of time so that you have time to go through your notes and ask your professor questions if you're confused on that topic. Don't wait until you get into the lab because then you're not going to get the most out of the lab. The purpose of doing a lab is to make what you're learning in lecture make sense. It all kind of comes together. And if you don't understand the topic in lecture and then you're just going to go into lab and kind of let your group mates do it because you don't know what's going on, you're not getting the most out of your education. And let's be real, this education costs a lot of money. You deserve to understand the concepts, especially if you live in a state like Georgia or New York where part of your board exam is a wet lab, a compounding lab. So if you don't understand what you're doing, you're not going to pass your boards. So really make sure you go into it knowing what the lab's about, what is the purpose of the lab, what's the objective, what are you testing for, what are you doing, and then that way you'll have a much more beneficial experience in the lab. Okay, the third thing is do your calculations before you get there. So in pharmacy labs, a vast majority of them have calculations that you have to do, especially for my school, we had Pharmaceutics 1 and their labs and then Pharmaceutics 2. Pharmaceutics 2 had a lot of calculations. You really want to make sure you know how to do those or have an idea of how to do them before you go into the lab. So usually what I would do before lab is I would sit down in my hotel room because I was out of town and I would do the calculations the night before. And that way, even if they changed some things the day of the lab, I knew what I was doing and I could just kind of go back and change it. Or, if there were a couple of calculations where I'm like, I'm not quite sure how to do this, I knew to kind of flag it in the lab manual and I could ask my professor when I got to class the next day or ask my group mates like, hey, do you know how to do this calculation? I couldn't figure it out last night. So really want to make sure you do that. That's really important that you know how to do the calculations. And it's great to do it the night before too because that way you're not wasting time during the lab trying to figure out how to do the calculations. You already have them done, so you can just go ahead and measure out the quantities of things that you need. and you don't have to waste time kind of fiddling with your calculator and figuring all that out. Tip number 4 is to research the topic. So say you're at home and you're reading through tomorrow's lab and it has a certain technique that you don't know. Like maybe the wet gum method of preparing emulsions, okay? And you're like, I don't really know what this is. They briefly talked about it in lecture, but I'm really not sure. Research it. So the first thing I always do is go to YouTube, especially for lab stuff, because it's visual. You want to see it because you're going to be visually doing it in the lab, right? So I actually did this during lecture before labs, but go on YouTube and search that technique. So like wet gum method for preparing emulsions. And you should see some videos come up of like pharmacy technician programs or pharmacy programs. A lot of times we'll have a professor or a TA do a demonstration of it so their students can go on and see it. And that's really good because it kind of helps you take it from just steps on a paper to visually what you're actually doing. It makes it more real. So definitely do that. If you can't find a video, maybe you can find pictures, like step-by-step pictures. Just research. See if you can find something that tells you what you're actually doing. So again, you're not going in there like, I have no clue what I'm doing today. I'm going to look like an idiot. All my group mates are going to think I'm stupid. Like, you have an idea. By the way, it does not matter if your group mates think you're stupid or if they think that you don't know what you're doing. Your education is for you. Yes, they put you in groups because they want to save money, because if everybody was doing their own labs, they would have to buy so much more lab equipment, right? But your lab is for you. Your grade is for you. Do the best that you can, but do the best that you can. Like, don't walk in there and be like, completely, I have no idea what I'm doing today. My group mates are going to have to carry me because I don't understand this. No, you need to prepare and you need to go in there ready. Because for one, that shows your professor that you care about your grades, you care about your education. And again, you're going to get more out of it. So definitely prepare before you go into those labs. Okay, and my 5th tip is common sense, but ask for help. If you're so confused, you have no idea what you're doing, especially if you're not only confused in the lab, but you don't understand the lecture either, because they go together, right? If you're just like, I have no clue what's going on, ask for help. Ask your classmates for help. Most of them, I'm sure, are very willing to help you. If you have like a TA for the class, ask them for help. Go to your professor's office hours. They're there for you. That's their job. They're paid to be there for you. So, don't be afraid to like look stupid. Or I know that's such a big thing when you're younger, especially like in high school. People are so afraid to look dumb. And if you're in pharmacy school, you're not dumb. That you got in. The hard part's over, you know? So if you're confused, go to your professor for help. They're there for you. But always put your hardest work in first. Before reaching out for help, help yourself. You know that thing when you're like, on a plane, the plane's going down, and they're like, put the mask on your face before you help somebody else, right? Help yourself first. Do your research. Put in everything that you can, and if you're still super confused, ask for help, because it's your education. So you're going to get out of it what you put into it, okay? So put your hardest work in, put your best foot forward, try as hard as you possibly can, and you'll be fine. Labs are such a small component of your grades. Like for me, this past year, I only had labs for Pharmaceutics 1 and 2. For Pharmaceutics 1, it was 10% of our overall grade, and for Pharmaceutics 2, it was 5%. So very small percentage of your grade is labs. If you want to go into compounding or something like that in the future, obviously that's a bigger deal for you if you want to take like an advanced compounding elective or something. But for most of us, like I don't want to be in compounding at all when I graduate. So for me, it was just kind of like, it was cool to see the stuff firsthand and actually get to make some stuff, but I know that I'm not going to be doing that in the future. But it was a good experience. So definitely do your best, put your best foot forward, try your hardest, but don't freak out if you're not the best in the lab, because that's not the point of it. Always ask for help. Always ask for help. Do not be afraid. Everybody needs help sometimes, you know. Sometimes labs just aren't your thing. You know, sometimes you're more of the book person, the bookwork, you're not the hands-on person, and that's fine. But don't sit there and be like, well, I don't know how to do it, so I'm not going to do it. You have to try. That's all my tips for you. Hopefully this helped a little bit. If you have more specific questions about a lab, just kind of like, I don't know, expectations or if you're just curious about anything that we did in labs, let me know. They really were not a big deal, so please don't freak out about it going into pharmacy school. If you're not good at labs, you'll be fine. They're really not as big a deal as you might think they are. So I hope you all have a great day, and please subscribe if you haven't already. Thumbs up if you want more videos like this, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.